To kick it off, we have special guests from Sonoma State University, Mark Nelson, former president and CEO of the Nelson family of companies, and now entrepreneur in residence at SSU. Dr. Paul Porter from SSU Department of Education Leadership also joins us this morning. Please welcome them up.
So, thank you very much. After spending over 2 decades in the human resource, talent acquisition, and workforce solutions space, I can tell you something, and that is the greatest businesses are learning institutions, and the greatest learning institutions are businesses. And so that transparency and that line that we like to put between education and business, which my colleague, Dr. Paul Porter, will talk about in a minute, is increasingly dissipating. So I want to ask you a question. We're going to tell you a little bit about what's going on in Sonoma State because we have an entrepreneurial movement in education that's happening, and we think it's something very, very special. But before I do that, I'd like to ask everybody a question. How many of you have started your own business? How many of you plan on starting your own business? Let me tell you something, folks. When I was in that space of talent acquisition, there were 3 buckets of people that started really assisting me in formulating some opinions about the world of work and how it was getting done. One, a lot of our young people, and none of them are in this room, simply weren't ready. They were not ready. 2, and just about 10 years ago, I would sit across the desk from people that had storied careers, graduated from outstanding universities, perhaps they worked at the same company for 15, 20 years, and I'd sit across and I'd glance at their resume and I'd look them in the eye, and after talking to them for about 20 or 30 minutes, I realized something. I couldn't help them. They had become irrelevant. They'd stopped learning. They'd stopped investing in themselves. And then there was this 3rd bucket of people. Really exciting bucket. And keep in mind, I'm dealing with companies like Google and Sony Computer Entertainment and Bank of America and many others. And these people are calling their own shots. They were, in some cases, working for multiple companies at the same time. Making great money, learning like crazy. And it hit me. And that's why I asked you this question. It hit me. In this day and age, we are all our own business. We are all our own, what we coined, economic unit of one. And what we're trying to do through this movement at Sonoma State University is unleash the purposes and passions in young people through our educational system so that they, A, have some purpose, but also they're relevant. And they understand the concepts of lifelong learning and lifelong investment. Many of us think that the greatest assets that we have are the equity in our house, or our 401k plan, or our pension, or our stocks, or whatever it is. But the reality is, the greatest asset we have is ourselves. And we don't think of it that way. So why aren't we investing in ourselves and in our young people with that type of framework in mind? In this day and age, you cannot help. You cannot stop investing. Education is a lifelong endeavor. It's not about a diploma, although that helps. It's not about graduating from a university, although that helps. It's about continuing to make sure you're relevant. And we are trying to instill through my colleagues and through our educational system. By the way, Sonoma State graduates about 30% of the teachers that are hired north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Very powerful. This guy plays a huge role in that. 50% of the administrators north of the Golden Gate Bridge are somehow touched by Sonoma State University. So we have a very powerful channel to make a difference in the lives of our young people. I believe that educators, when I look back on my life, outside of my parents, 4 of the 5 most influential people that affected me were educators or coaches. So we're in the process of developing an online course which is called the Entrepreneurial Educator. We're starting a movement which is called, at this point, Startup Classroom. Don't be fearful of the word. As you all know, every time you have a student as an educator, every time you start a new school year, it's a startup. I'm going to let Paul tell you a little bit about some of the really cool stuff that we're doing at Sonoma State. Thanks.
Thank you. So something puzzled me when I first started thinking about this whole topic is why do we have this separation between education and business? In the educational world, we're always, I don't know if you talk to teachers, we're bemoaning that businesses don't really reinforce and carry on learning and all sorts of misconceptions like that. And the business world is always complaining that we're not getting the kinds of students and graduates that we need for our businesses. And yet we go on week after week having this separation of school of business, school of education. We seldom talk to each other. We don't dislike each other, but we just haven't done that. So along come Mark and I to try to see if we can try to change that a little bit. And I think we're trying to make a step in that direction. We believe that there's been an artificial separation between business and education. That indeed business can learn a huge amount from education, and education can learn in turn a lot from business. So if you think about it, we're trying to kind of help the communication and joint cooperation between these 2 different fields. What Mark and I have thought about and kind of discovered is that a lot of the terms that we use in education, or maybe this is my discovery and not so much Mark's, is that we have a lot of terms in education that seem very educational. We have a lot of terms in business that seem business related, but we started making some links. You know, in education, we talk about the importance of self-fulfilling, every kid's dream, etc. In education, Mark and I have been talking about what he just mentioned, each person thinking of themselves and their own development as an economic unit of one. What if every single student in our schools didn't come and just sit passively and get stuff? What if they said, look, I'm responsible for myself. I have got to keep learning. In a way, I've got to develop what we're calling a life portfolio right from the beginning. What if we could instill that attitude more and more and more in our students? What if we could take some of the principles of business around relevant purpose, et cetera, and translate those to the educational world? So that's what we're kind of working on. I've also thought, I don't know, this is probably before the Civil War when I was in school, but I don't know if you remember, but when I was in 11th or 12th grade, we did a career education unit. Remember that? Or we had career week or career night when people came in and spoke to students. Well, our movement that we're trying to start here is saying, look, those are things are great. Career education is fantastic. In fact, we've got some great career ed people here in this room. But we've got to get students at a much earlier age to start thinking like an educational entrepreneur. And we've kind of coined the word, let me see if I can say it, an edupreneur. Someone who thinks about education in an entrepreneurial sense. Not about money, not about investments in the stock market per se, but about investing in themselves. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to translate between those 2 fields. How can we really start teaching these kind of skills at a young age with our kids? How can we take some of the terms from business like agile, etc., and translate that into educational terms? We talk about change in education. How do we talk in the business world? And what we're talking about is how do you encourage responsible risk-taking? Well, in the educational field, we've talked for a long time about pushing young people to higher and higher goals and limits, etc. So we're trying to take some of these terms, get them to be taught at a much earlier age, get our teachers and our students to think more about how they can help make every student an entrepreneur and an economic unit of one. So we're very excited about the MOOC we're starting. That's a large online class that Mark has spearheaded, and I'm also working on it. We're very excited about this combination of the School of Business and the School of Education. And so you're, I think, going to be hearing a lot more about that. We think we're the first university in the nation that's approaching this entrepreneurialism from an educational standpoint with the School of Business and Education working together. So I'll let Mark say a few words about exactly what we're doing. Thank you.
Well, I'm conscious of time, Neil, so just let me tell you this. This is something special. We have an opportunity to work collaboratively with a very, very strong School of Business and an outstanding School of Education. And the reality is, if we can start breaking down barriers there, we can do it anywhere. Because let me tell you something, universities work in silos. I don't know if you know that, but I've learned that the hard way. I have had the great opportunity to speak at the Educators Breakfast at the Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce I don't know, 6 months ago. And the fact that we're sitting down and sharing tables together is a key. But the reality is that it has to happen every day. And that if we as individuals take ownership for our lifelong learning, to build our life portfolios, to navigate between worlds. Let me tell you something, it wasn't my lifelong dream to be in the educational environment, but I'm drinking my Kool-Aid. I'm drinking my Kool-Aid, which is navigate between worlds. If you're an educator, step across the line. If you're a business person, step across the line. Because that's where it all starts. That's what we're trying to instill in our young people. The more that they navigate between worlds, opportunities create experiences, and experiences create opportunities. Look, I used to be a member of this golf club. I lost more balls out of here. I tried to count today than I can even imagine. I haven't picked up a golf club in 3.5 years since I picked up a guitar. Okay? It's about learning new languages. It's about learning new things. It's about putting yourself in places that may be a little uncomfortable to mitigate risk, to eliminate fear. Thanks.